Welcome back, everyone, to the Michigan Trails Report. I'm your host, Tom Funk, here to guide you through to the rich history of exploration and discovery that has shaped the world we live today. And today's episode is brought to you by Nortive 8, the makers of reasonably priced hiking footwear. They'll get you onto the trails comfortably and affordably. Check them out at Nortive8.com. Today I'll be sharing the fascinating life and adventures of Jean Nicolet, a significant figure in the history of North American exploration, and he is known for his explorations in the early 17th century in the upper Midwest. Nicolet's journeys took him from the bustling settlements of Quebec to the vast and mysterious territories around Lake Michigan and Wisconsin. So let's load up on some water and, let's head over to Quebec, and maybe we'll end up in Lake Huron, or maybe even Lake Michigan. All right, so much of today's podcast is gleaned from a book written by C.W. Butterfield, and it's called The History of the Discovery of the Midwest, Jean Nicolet in 1634. So this book was actually written, it was written in the late 1800s, so this has been around a while. So Jean Nicolet de Belleborne was born around 1598 in Cherbourg, Normandy, France. And little is known about his early life, but what we do know is that he came from a modest family. His father, Thomas Nicolet, was a mail carrier, and his mother, Marguerite, she was a stay-at-home mother. Now, from a young age, Jean showed an adventurous spirit and a keen interest in the world beyond his hometown. So his journey into the annals of history began when he was recruited by none other than Samuel de Champlain. Yes, that Champlain, the famous French explorer and founder of Quebec. Now, Champlain was instrumental in establishing the French presence in North America, and he recognized the potential in the young Nicolet. In 1618, at the age of 20, Nicolet arrived in New France, eager to explore and establish trade relations with the indigenous peoples of the region. His first assignment was to live among the Algonquin people on Allumette Island in the Ottawa River. And this experience was crucial in shaping Nicolet's understanding of indigenous cultures and languages. And I'm going to be sharing excerpts from his book, and as always, keep in mind that the language as written was written, darn near 200 years ago. You may hear words that may make you feel uncomfortable, and I'll try to explain their context if I stumble upon one. Please don't apply today's values and standards to what was going on back in the 1800s, especially as language relates. All right, so from the book. In 1618, an opportunity presented itself for him to add another, him being Champlain, to another young Frenchman to the list of who had been sent to be trained in all the mysteries of the savage life. For in the year Jean Nicolet arrived from France, he was dispatched into the woods. Living among the Algonquin, Nicolet learned the language and customs, and he formed strong alliances, and he gained a reputation as a capable and trustworthy intermediary. From the book, Nicolet, while residing with the Algonquins of Isle de Allumette, with whose language he had now become familiar, accompanied 400 of those savages upon a mission of peace to the Iroquois. The voyage proved a successful one, Nicolet returning in safety. Afterward, he took up his residence among the Nipissings, with whom he remained 8 or 9 years. He was recognized as one of the nation, and he entered into the very frequent councils of those savages. He also had his own cabin and his own establishment, doing his own fishing and trading, and he had become, indeed, a naturalized Nipissing. The word savage basically means not European back in the day. All right, so now he spent several years with the Algonquin. Nicolet was ready for greater challenges, and important to note at this time, too, is a lot of the dates and the years, the timelines, are still to this day, they're not exactly 100% sure what years and months some of this stuff took place, because these guys would go off in the woods for 2, 3, 4 years at a time and come back, so keep that in mind. But anyways, in the early 1630s, the French were eager to expand their fur trade westward and explore the uncharted territories beyond the Great Lakes. Nicolet was chosen for this daunting task due to his knowledge of the land and the relationships with the indigenous peoples. From Butterfield's book, Nicolet finally left the savages and returned to civilization, being called by the government and employed as commissary and Indian interpreter. It is probable, however, that he had signified his desire to leave the Nipissings, as he could not live without the sacraments, which were denied him so long as he remained with them, there being no mission established in their country. So he went out, and then he came back, and he wanted to go back out again. So that's basically the story there. So in 1634, Nicolet embarked on a historic journey from Quebec to what is now Wisconsin. He was accompanied by a group of experienced voyagers and Algonquin guides. Their route took them up the Ottawa River, across Lake Nipissing, and down the French River to Georgian Bay, which is on Lake Huron. From there, they navigated through the intricate waterways of the Great Lakes, including Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. So he passed through the Straits of Mackinac. The dates of travel, again, debated for several hundred years, but according to Butterfield, Nicolet may have started on the St. Lawrence River as early as June 1634. From the book, Nicolet was ready to embark in an undertaking which, of necessity, would have caused so much consultation and preparation as to preclude the idea of his arrival just then from the Ottawa. An Indian interpreter, one well acquainted with the Algonquins of the Ottawa and to a certain extent with the Hurons of Georgian Bay, who could Champlain more safely depend on than Nicolet to develop his schemes of exploration in the unknown Western country, the door of which he had himself opened in previous years. Who was there better to qualify than his young protege, familiar as he was with the Algonquin and Huron Iroquois tongues, to hold talks with savage tribes and still further west, and smoke with them the pipe of peace, to the end that a nearer route to China and Japan might be discovered, or at least that the fur trade might be made more profitable to the 500 associates. Surely no one. Hence, it was clear that Nicolet was recalled by the governor of Canada. So Nicolet got the job, and he basically had started off taking the traditional canoe route that you'll hear and read about, going up the Ottawa over the Lake Nipissing and then down the French to Georgian Bay. From Butterfield, more from him. From Lake Huron, they had entered upon one of the channels of the magnificent waterway leading out from Lake Superior and threaded their way now through narrow rapids, now across, as it were, little lakes, now around beautiful islands to within 15 miles of the largest expanse of fresh water on the globe, stretching away in its grandeur to the westward a distance of full 400 miles. So it's important to note, so he went into Georgian Bay. He actually went up St. Mary's, and he made it to Lake Superior, but then he turned around and came back. Nicolet tarried among the people of the Falls, probably but for a brief period. His voyage, after leaving them, must have been to him one of the great interests. He returned down the strait, passing it through the western detour to Mackinac. Not very many miles brought him to the second freshwater sea, Lake Michigan. He is fairly entitled to the honor of his discovery, for no white man had ever before looked upon its broad expanse. Nicolet was soon gliding upon the clear waters of this out-of-the-way link in the great chain of lakes. The bold Frenchman fearlessly threaded his way along its northern shore, frequently stopping upon what is now known as the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, until the Bay of Nicolet was reached, which is in reality a northern arm of Green Bay. The book continues. Here, upon its northern border, he visited another Algonquin tribe, also one living to the northward of this. These tribes never navigated those waters any great distance, but lived upon the fruits of the earth. Making his way up Green Bay, he finally reached the Menominee River, its principal northern affluent. So, scrolling back, I usually mention this at the beginning of the podcast. Please keep in mind that the indigenous and Native Americans have been canoeing these waters for thousands and thousands of years. Nicolet is just only the first European to have ever laid eyes on it. So he didn't discover it by no means, but that was the language they used back in the day. So there's another source this is from the History Museum of Canada, and it explains that Jean Nicolet's journey, it was a monumental undertaking involving traversing difficult terrain, navigating treacherous waters, and relying heavily on the expertise and goodwill of indigenous allies. So he would stop along the way, and he had this thing where he would wear basically it looked like a priest's black robe, but he was wearing Chinese clothing because he thought he was going to find China, and he brought it with him two handguns, and he would actually fire them off. So it was to get attention. So if you read any history about the area, you'll read about Native Americans talking about how he's got fire coming from his hands, and it was just him shooting off some pistols. So, Nicolet's goal was to find a passage to the Pacific Ocean, or as it was known then, the Western Sea, and to establish direct trade relations with the native tribes there. So it was a green velvet robe, and it had flowers and birds and things like that, and it was a symbol of his high status and intentions of peace if he actually reached China. More from the book from Butterfield. Nicolet soon resumed his journey toward the Winnebagos, who had already been made aware of his near approach, for he had sent forward one of his Hurons to carry the news of his coming and of his mission of peace. The messenger and his message were well received. The Winnebagos dispatched several of their young men to meet the wonderful man. All right, so after weeks of arduous travel, Nicolet and his party, they arrived at the western shore of Lake Michigan, and they entered Green Bay. It was inhabited by the Ho-Chunk people, also known as the Winnebago. This moment was significant not only for Nicolet, but also for the French, as it marked the first recorded contact between Europeans and the Winnebagos or Ho-Chunk. Nicolet's arrival, it was a grand affair. It was a big deal. He donned his ceremonial robe. He fired his pistols in the air, a gesture meant to demonstrate both his peaceful intentions and the power of the French. So the Ho-Chunk, they were intrigued and maybe a bit wary, but they did welcome Nicolet and his companions. And I don't think it actually tells you the numbers in here, but literally hundreds and hundreds of people came to see him when he landed there in Wisconsin. So from Butterfield, in what is now the state of Wisconsin, possibly a party of mandarins would soon greet him and welcome him to Cathay. Now, mandarins are from China. Cathay is another name for China. More from Butterfield. As this robe, this dress of ceremony was brought all the way from Quebec, doubtless with a view to such contingency. As soon as he came in sight, all the women and children fled, seeing a man carrying a thunder in his two hands. For thus it was they called his pistols, which he discharged on his right and on his left. He was a Manito. Nicolet's journey was, for the present and the end, at an end. He and his Hurons rested from their labors among the Winnebagos, who were located around the head of the waters of the Fox River. So the Fox River flows into Green Bay. So he paddled up Fox River up to a Winnebago village, and he stayed there. So from Wisconsin History magazine, I found that Nicolet's encounter with the Ho-Chunk was a pivotal moment in the history of European exploration. It did pave the way for future interactions and establish a French presence in the region. And this also became a major portage route because he was almost to the Wisconsin River. So you go up the Fox and you portage over to the Wisconsin, and it takes you down to the Mississippi River. From Butterfield, the news of the Frenchman's coming spread through the country. 4,000 or 5,000 people assembled at different times. Each of the chiefs gave a don cut, which is they basically sit there and they regale their guests with food and things like that. So these large assemblages, they were prolific of speeches and ceremonies. Nicolet did not fail to speak of peace upon that interesting occasion. He urged upon the nation the advantages of an alliance rather than a war. The nations to the eastward of Lake Huron would like peace, and they agreed to keep the peace with the Hurons, the Nez Perces, and possibly the other tribes, but soon after Nicolet's return, they sent out war parties against the Beaver Nation. So he actually spent a couple weeks with the Ho-Chunk learning about their culture, negotiating trade agreements, gathering information about surrounding territories. He was so close to finding the river to the Mississippi, but as far as we know, he never made it. He was looking for that elusive passage to the Pacific, but he ended up staying in this village for a while, but he did gain valuable insights to the geography and indigenous networks of the area. From Butterfield, Nicolet had navigated the Fox River, a 6 days journey, and while among the Massacoutins, heard of the Wisconsin River, which was distanced only by 3 days' journey up the tortuous channel of the Fox. But the accounts given him of that tributary of the Mississippi were evidently very confused. A reference to the parent stream, confounded with the Wisconsin, was called the Great Water by the savages. It caused him to believe that he was, in reality, 3 days' journey from the sea, and so he reported after his return to the St. Lawrence that he was very, very close. But strange to say, Nicolet resolved not to visit the ocean, although, as he believed, he was very close to it, so it's very weird. And he traveled no further up the Fox River. He eventually, that's as far as he made it on his trip, and he turned his course, and he headed back. So Nicolet's journey through the Great Lakes region was remarkable, not only for its length and ambition, but also for the intricate routes he and his companions navigated. Again, this was it became a major portage route. It had always been a major portage route for the indigenous, but it became one as well for fur traders. From Butterfield, before Nicolet left the country on his return to the St. Lawrence, he obtained knowledge of the Sioux, those traders from the west who, it will be remembered, were represented as coming in canoes upon a sea to the Winnebagos, the same quote-unquote sea, doubtless, he came so near to, but did not behold, which was the Wisconsin and Mississippi rivers. The collaboration between Nicolet and his companions, particularly especially the indigenous guides, exemplifies the interdependence necessary for successful exploration during this era. So with the fur trade, the traders would bring along with them sometimes priests, and they would bring along other Native Americans that would help interpret and do trade. So this initial meeting went a long way because he was able to foster relationships and work with his new companions. And this was a testament to his leadership and diplomatic skills. And these traits would continue to serve him well throughout his career. All right, after his groundbreaking expedition to Green Bay, Nicolet returned to Quebec in 1635, or so we think. His journey was celebrated as a major achievement, and he provided detailed accounts of the lands and peoples he encountered. These reports were invaluable to the French colonial administration, shaping future exploration and trade policies. From Butterfield. So Nicolet, in the spring of 1635, having previously made many friends in the far northwest for his countrymen upon the St. Lawrence, and for France, of nations of Indians, only a few of which had been heard of, and none ever before visited by a white man, having been the first to discover Lake Michigan and the territory northwest of the river Ohio, having boldly struck into the wilderness for hundreds of leagues beyond the Huron villages, then the Ultima Thule of civilized discoveries, returned with his 7 dusky companions by way of Macedon along the south shores of the great Manitoulin Island to the home thereon with a band of Ottawas. So Nicolet continued to play a prominent role in New France. He was appointed as the commis, or agent, for the company of Saint Associates, a powerful trading company that controlled much of the fur trade in New France. And in his capacity, Nicolet worked to strengthen alliances with indigenous tribes and expanded French influence in the region. Nicolet's contributions extended beyond his explorations. He was instrumental in establishing trade networks and continued his diplomatic relations that would benefit New France for decades. Tragically, Nicolet's life was cut short in 1642. He drowned in the St. Lawrence River near Sillery, Quebec, during a violent storm. And despite his untimely death, Nicolet's net legacy as a pioneer, explorer, and diplomat endures. So Nicolet's legacy is a rich tapestry woven from his explorations, diplomatic endeavors, contributions to the redevelopment of New France. His journey to Green Bay remains a landmark event in the history of North American exploration. So if you're a fan of history like I am, Nicolet is kind of a big deal. And let's see. So, as an avid hiker and explorer myself, I find his story pretty cool. Every time I drive US 2 and stop at that rest area at the northernmost point of Lake Michigan, I always think to myself, hey, Jean Nicolet, he actually paddled by here at one point. So, whether you're exploring the vast wilderness of Michigan or, historical trails in New France, this spirit of exploration that drove Nicolet can still be felt today. It's a reminder that there is always something new to discover out there, and the journey itself can be as rewarding as the destination. And my computer just flipped out on me, so let's see what happens. We may be done here, guys. Let's see. There we go. Oh, hey, it does. That wraps up today's episode of Michigan Trails Report. So, hey, thanks for letting us take a deep dive into Jean Nicolet's story. And again, big thank you to our sponsor, Nortive 8. And thank you for my friend Adam Main for our wonderful bumper music that you hear in the background. So until next time, this is Tom Funk signing off. Keep exploring, stay curious, and may you always find your way.